A sadistic child abuser goes for a walk. He's in a park. He sees a child. Can you take us inside his mind at that moment, what it is that he's thinking or feeling that is propelling him towards that child in an attempt to lure?
They see them as instruments for their own gratification. One offender said, "I have desperately tried to turn them into human beings. I try to see them as children. I try to see them as people, and I'm unable to. I just can't do it. They're simply there for me to live out the fantasies that are in my head."
Wow. That is a level of psychosis that's unimaginable to most of us. Do you understand it?
I have been face to face with them many times, so I know who they are. I know when they say it, what they're going to say. I know that that's their experience, but it's completely foreign to humanity. It's completely inhumane.
Do they understand the disgust with which society views them?
Yes.
What do they think about that?
Depending on the offender, they either feel that we as a society are the distorted ones, that we don't understand how beautiful this can be, that we don't understand that what they were doing wasn't harmful, that we don't understand that a 6-year-old in fact can consent, and others just don't care.
Deliberate, staged acts are very common among ritual abusers to confuse their victims. Another favorite one is alien abduction. So a lot of these cult groups stage an alien abduction, and they will stage a surgery by an alien, and then they will make the victim believe that that is what happened to them, and through torture and dissociation, they will bury the memories of the cult abuse more deeply, so that now the person sounds like, that they believe that their trauma is alien abduction. And for the victim, it works because now they have a basis for all of this fear that they have. They know that they're terrified. They know they have post-traumatic stress disorder, but now they think it's all from an alien abduction, but it was a staged alien abduction. So there's a lot of sources of disinformation within the victims.
As a cover, ritual abusers, and I'm wondering if they would go through the whole, costume thing, embed in their victims, actually, to them, it's a true memory, but it's of a false situation, and that is they were not abducted by aliens, but that is what they've been implanted with, and that's the cover that the abusers can hide behind. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, that's extremely
common among ritual abuse survivors.
Now, that is not to say, and I don't know, that is not to say, I would assume, that some folks who claim to have that happened would have necessarily been victims of this, or maybe I'm wrong. Do you believe it's a 100% deal? I doubt it would be, but what do you think about that those who claim they may have been abductees might have very well been, unwittingly, victims of abusers?
But yeah, I think some people who believe they were abductees are ritual abuse victims.
Well, welcome to another segment of the Grassy Knoll on this August 16th, 2006. This is Viz, and we have with us a woman to whom we will refer as Maury. Her website is reflectionsinthenight.com.
Well, I was born April 30th, 1941 in Cedar City, Utah. I was absolutely an autistic child. The rat line was where the Catholic Church helped the Nazis escape. All over the world, they say they came, but they came in large numbers to South America at the end of World War II. I did a lot of stuff out of China Lake and with the Jet Propulsion Laboratory. When they used me as a gray, I was with other children also. There were other grays there.
Now, when you're saying grays, and we'll talk about this later, you're referring to, I guess, what, to represent
yes,
aliens?
Gray, UFO.
You've mentioned the grays, you mentioned the UFO hoax.
Can you tell us what was all going on about that?
They had out in the Mojave Desert, and I don't know how many people knew because my memory of it was that Mrs. 𝗧𝗿𝗱𝗶𝗁 was there, and I was there, and the Nazis were there. I don't remember seeing the group from JPL, but it looked like the China Lake area. It felt right. When I first heard about China Lake, I thought it was up higher in the state. I kind of knew where I was taken. I knew I was taken out in the Mojave Desert regularly. And when I saw China Lake was in the Mojave Desert, I know, how'd I miss that? They had some kind of a hangar, and it looked like they did have, the UFO, they had something. They had something that was round and would go up vertical and had flashing lights. And my guess, the Foo Fighter that they talk about,
in the Second World War?
I kind of looked it up, but I thought it was bigger than that. I would have guessed more like a helicopter that was dressed up. And they had something.
Well, and what were they doing with it? Were they making films, or?
Well, they were going to do this UFO hoax because they had a group of kids all dressed up like the Greys, and they just made something up to make you look otherworldly. And what they made up caught on. Everybody remembered that costume.
Are we thinking basically about the ET type prototype?
Yes, that's just a little naked child. They put a nylon stocking over your head to make your mouth disappear into a slit, and your ears, two holes on the side of your head, and you can't talk. And they put goggles on. I think they originally used the World War II goggles, but they may have put that down to just the goggle lenses because your eyes disappear too, and you just look like, you don't look like anything. So, and they have you naked, but you see all the original, and they were little girls. They used little girls. They kept us thin because one of the ways they control you is to starve you. But you see all those original pictures, and they're all naked. Boy, I remember being cold is what I remember. They kept us naked out there in the desert, and it's freezing cold a lot. I just really remember being cold.
Were you out there for days or weeks straight?
I have no idea because I have no idea. All the memories haven't come up on that. I don't know how much they used me. I just have some of it. Something may come up later, and I don't know.
Well, during your lifetime and during your, obviously, memory, we had Roswell. Can you shed any light on what we know about Roswell?
Well, I get a little upset when they say that some little, when they say, oh, they caught the aliens and somebody died, then I start to get up thinking one of my little friends died, I don't know. They didn't care whether we died or not.
But do you believe that the whole Roswell situation was an extension of what you experienced?
Yes, I think it was the same period of time.
Well, there's no doubt, obviously, that there have been crafts that can do what we claim UFOs can do, because obviously it does happen. We've all seen things. I don't know what it means in the big picture, but obviously these anti-gravity crafts were around for some time, and you can attest to the fact too. Were they not around in the late 40s?
Yes, they started this. They started this right. Out of JPL in that area. That was started very soon. Well, I remember being there. I think 1947. I think that's about right. I think that I was about 6. I think that I felt about 6. So they were real busy out there. They had all of a sudden the Nazis were in there. They'd gotten. They now controlled the group of physicists at JPL and
GHB and abductees. Now, abductees, what I mean is alien abductees. Everyone knows I'm a MUFON investigator. I followed this for decades. There was a doctor named Dr. John Mack, psychiatrist, Harvard University. Brilliant man. Brilliant psychiatrist. So he's a physician. And during his tenure at Harvard, he started to get interested in abductees. And he started to do some research and interview each one. And he did hundreds. And he wrote a series of books about it. Now, here's where I always come into the problem when I'm doing these sort of things in front of groups or at conferences. I get a very small section of the community who thinks that abductees and UFOs is crap and don't even bring it up, Dave. Then you got other people who I talk about cryptids and they say, oh, that's crap, don't talk about it, Dave. in the reality. You are an expert at what you're interested in. And what you're not interested in, many people refuse to even acknowledge it. And some of those people in the UFO community, I've said this before, when I give a talk in front of a MUFON group, sometimes the whole front row is all PhDs. Brilliant people. And when I get off stage and I usually have dinner and I get invited to dinner by these groups, they all surround me and they say, Dave, you're one of the few people who has come to the table with facts. This is nourishing. This is good. You know, let's keep talking. Very appreciative. Well, John Mack came to the table with facts. He had interviewed hundreds of these abductees and all told a very similar story. The experience, the abduction, one consistency. They'd wake up at night in their bed and they felt absolutely frozen. They couldn't move. Sound familiar? Sometimes they had loss of memory. Sometimes they didn't. Sometimes they could remember everything. Things that happened to them on wherever they were taken, claiming a ship. Some of the things that were done to them. But they couldn't lash out. They couldn't move. They felt like they were somehow frozen and their muscles weren't reacting. Sound familiar? So that goes back to GHB. And there seems to be some linkage there. Whether people want to acknowledge it or not, there seems to be.
In 2017, retired Air Force intelligence officer Richard Doty made history when he admitted on camera that unacknowledged special access projects within the military do indeed stage alien abductions to lay the psychological foundation for an interplanetary conflict sometime in the near future.
We did do that, yes. OSI did that. There was a special group out of the 7602nd Air Intel Wing at Fort Belvoir that came out and did that. They had these people that had maybe some sort of defects, anatomical defects that were brought in to fool people into thinking they're aliens. Yeah. I can't give you any specifics because the program is still classified, and they probably still doing it. I wouldn't doubt it. They were still doing it.
This corroborates what dozens of other insiders have disclosed to Dr. Greer, but they're too afraid to testify on camera.
If you go back in time, why Area 51 really started, you learn that it was a base hidden inside of a base, nuclear weapons, and it was all about beating Stalin at his black propaganda campaign, as I write in the book, to hoax Americans in a War of the Worlds type scenario, whereby little men who looked like aliens would get out of an aircraft and the government would go crazy about it. And then Stalin would say, look, not only do we have technology better than you, but we have a better propaganda department than you. In my book, I interview a man who worked for the Atomic Energy Commission, who tells a different story, tells the story of receiving that craft at Area 51 in 1951, which is why the base is called Area 51.
Oh.
And that inside the craft were humans who had been altered, surgically altered to look like aliens, in a plan for Stalin to sort of twist Truman's arm, because at that time, we had the atomic bomb. When Roswell happened, we had the atomic bomb, and the Soviets did not.
Can I stop you there?
Yeah.
When you say humans that were surgically altered to look like aliens, do you mean, so this is 1951, so
Yes.
you're talking about 4 years after the supposed crash.
Yes.
So what
They
was
had the bodies,
left?
they kept the bodies.
They kept the
brought them.
bodies. In what?
And-
Formaldehyde? Like what?
Yes, and also because the idea was, and remember, or I can't say remember because you haven't read the book yet.
Right.
And I wrote this book 8 years ago.
Mm.
But it did really impact a lot of my thinking and working on government secrecy projects, because it makes you really consider what a hoax means and what it means to a population of people, and how the government begins to work with disinformation versus cover stories and all of that. But going back to answer your question, if you follow the logic that my source told me, that these were, modified human beings as part of a hoax. And the reason that I trust the source is because, Joe, he told me that he also worked on the program. So he had like a burden to unload, right? And so if you follow that logic through, then the Bob Lazar story is that when Bob Lazar said, I saw an alien, it looked like this, it was small, it had big eyes. Those were those were the surgically modified humans that the government was doing experiments on. The source was a major player in the Manhattan Project. He went on and worked in the Atomic Energy Commission. I mean, there's a wing of a museum named after him. His accolades, his awards were so extraordinary. With a Q clearance, that's what you have when you have access to nuclear secrets. So if someone has a Q clearance for decades and they're full of garbage, you really have to ask, my God, should this guy have a Q clearance? I mean, that's reverse engineering his credibility. The book came out, his wife of 65 years knew it was him, okay? And I went out to Las Vegas and sat there in a room with the source and his wife. And she said, tell me this isn't true. Tell me you made this all up, to her husband. And he said, it's the truth. I mean, that's a triangular version of getting at the truth. But again, to reiterate, I believe he believes what he told me was the truth. That was the truth he was told. We met because I was interviewing nuclear weapons engineers who were setting off nuclear bombs in Area 51, in the Nevada test site, Area 12, Area 23. And they all said to me, you've got to talk to the top engineer of all this weaponry. And they gave me his name. And we talked for days and hours about nuclear weapons. And then, in one conversation, he began to cry and told me this story that I was like, what? He was crying because he participated in our version of the human experiments. Because what the Russians do, we do. According to him, we had a small program in 1951 where we wanted to see how the Russians did what they did, how they made human beings look like this. He said they were handicapped children. And he told me that he participated in this. So again, I mean, unless you have someone that lost their mind at age 90 and was willing to tell their wife of 65 years, I lost my mind. He had a grandchild that was born that way. And the grandchild did not live long. The grandchild died. And it made him feel so guilty about what he had done that he felt compelled to confess, if you will. And I remember saying to him, why are you telling me this? Why don't you tell a priest? And he said, a priest would judge me, and I can tell you won't.
All right, so it was forced by the sheer weight of the reports coming in from hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people around this planet. It was forced to expand. They said, okay, maybe we didn't understand it altogether, right? Maybe we just had part of it, and now we're going to get the rest of it. And what they were forced to face was that this agenda is far more complex than merely a degenerating alien race trying to upgrade their species, because it didn't explain what was going on in bedrooms, in cars, in homes around this planet night after night. Hopkins and Jacobs and others who had held to this crossbreeding scenario as a firmly fixed, limited agenda had to start expanding what they were saying. And soon they were postulating that the aliens were also studying human emotions. And they were also studying maybe, well, it appears they're studying human sexuality. And by golly, it looks like they're studying human pleasure and pain responses as well, from what the abductees are telling us is going on. And what do these things have to do with crossbreeding? Why do you subject a person to excruciating pain to measure a response in order to crossbreed? Why do you do sexual molestation to a 5-year-old to crossbreed? Why are these things happening, and what do they have to do with this agenda we felt real confident that we had understood? People were being subjected to terrifying situations, excruciatingly painful procedures, traumatic sexual encounters over which they had no control and for which no acceptable explanation has yet to be given.
A sadistic child abuser goes for a walk. He's in a park. He sees a child. Can you take us inside his mind at that moment, what it is that he's thinking or feeling that is propelling him towards that child in an attempt to lure?
They see them as instruments for their own gratification. One offender said, I have desperately tried to turn them into human beings. I try to see them as children. I try to see them as people, and I'm unable to. I just can't do it. They're simply there for me to live out the fantasies that are in my head.
Wow. That is a level of psychosis that's unimaginable to most of us. Do you understand it?
I have been face to face with them many times, so I know who they are. I know when they say it, what they're going to say. I know that that's their experience, but it's completely foreign to humanity. It's completely inhumane.
Do they understand the disgust with which society views them?
Yes.
What do they think about that?
Depending on the offender, they either feel that we as a society are the distorted ones, that we don't understand how beautiful this can be, that we don't understand that what they were doing wasn't harmful, that we don't understand that a 6-year-old in fact can consent, and others just don't care.
Keeping them honest tonight, potentially hundreds of military employees and contractors who may have bought child pornography online but haven't been prosecuted or even in some cases investigated. That's right, you heard me, child pornography. As many as 1,700 names, according to a U.S. senator, on a list of 5,200 from an internet sting operation overlooked the first time around 4 years ago. Only now are they supposedly getting a second look, and only after pressure from investigative reporters and the U.S. senator you're about to hear from, Republican Charles Grassley. Pentagon porn story began in 2006. An Immigration and Customs Enforcement child pornography sting operation called Project Flicker produced payment records of about 5,200 people, many of whom provided Army or fleet zip codes or military email addresses. Subsequently, the Pentagon's investigative branch, DCIS, began going through the ICE list to identify who actually was a DoD employee or a contractor. The investigation, however, only ran for 8 months and only cross-checked some 3,500 names for Pentagon ties, according to a senator. According to DCIS documents revealed in a Freedom of Information Act request, out of that 3,500, investigators uncovered 264 employees or contractors, including staffers for the Secretary of Defense and contractors at the NSA. 9 people had top security clearances. But only about 20% of those 264 people were completely investigated. Fewer still were prosecuted, and after about 8 months, the entire probe was halted. It left about 1,700 names totally unchecked, 1,700 alleged kiddie porn customers, an unknown number of whom may still work in some capacity for the Defense Department. Late last summer, after investigations by the Boston Globe and Yahoo News revealed the figures, a Pentagon spokesman promised to reopen the investigation, conceding that DCIS had stopped due to lack of resources. DCIS says it is now revisiting all 5,200 names, telling Senator Grassley's staff they've now identified 302 employees or staffers. The Pentagon's IG telling us, and I quote, any suggestion that the DoD Office of Inspector General or its criminal investigative arm, the DCIS, is not taking Operation Flicker and the issue of child pornography seriously is in error. But Senator Grassley says he is still not getting the cooperation he needs from the Pentagon. I spoke to him earlier. Senator Grassley, you were told that 5,200 Defense Department employees had allegedly purchased child porn, and yet you're saying only 3,500 of those names were cross-checked by a defense investigator to see if they were really DoD personnel. That's mind-boggling. Why weren't all of them cross-checked?
Well, we don't have an answer to that question, but it's quite obvious that the other 1,700 should have been cross-checked, and that's one of the answers to my questions that I want answered, and the implication of our questions is they ought to be cross-checked. We ought to find out, because we're talking about not just general pornography here. We're talking about child pornography, and child pornography, taking that down, is a crime. And also, there's an added factor here, considering the fact that there's a lot of secured information, national security information that the world shouldn't know, that a lot of times foreign operatives will use this sort of criminal activity to blackmail to get information. So there's a lot of things here that are involved because it's a Defense Department issue as opposed to any other department of government.
Right. I mean, sir, if your numbers are correct, 1,700 people out there who allegedly purchased child porn, we don't know if they were ever cross-checked or investigated, right?
That's true, and there's been some other names in the hundreds where there's the names have actually been given out that we don't know what's going to be done about them. Now, there's some reason to believe that it's a criminal act. It's been so far since it's happened that they could be stale. Maybe you can't have criminal prosecution, but we would be looking at administrative action to be taken against these people. And I want to know who they are and what administrative action's being taken.
Yeah, because I mean, what's even more startling is that of the 302 people confirmed as DoD personnel or contractors, only 70 of them were actually investigated. I mean, how is it possible that all of them weren't investigated?
Well, here's, I think, the thing that overrides everything you just asked, and that is we ask criminal investigators in the Division of Defense that does that, the extent to which supervisors of these people knew that this was going, and the criminal investigators couldn't even answer that question for us when we had a briefing from them.
So wait a minute, so you're saying we don't even know if the supervisors of these people were told that their employees may have downloaded child porn?
That's the question that my staff asked of the criminal investigators, and they could not answer the question whether or not supervisors had been informed of this. And if supervisors don't know about it, it's a bad environment that things like this can happen in the first place, and worse, that it's a criminal act when things are downloaded.
Until you started raising this issue, I mean, this investigation was closed by the Defense Department. They only investigated for about 8 months. Do you think the Pentagon just didn't take this seriously?
Well, it's quite obvious that they didn't take it seriously, because it wasn't only that I was asking the questions, it wasn't until it started getting questions from people like you who are journalists that this got their attention, and we got any consideration and reopening of this in the first place.
Well, one of your staffers told us that getting information from the Defense Department on this has been like pulling teeth. Is that how you describe it?
Yeah. Oh, I've been involved in oversight of the Defense Department for almost all the years I've been in the United States Senate, and it's very difficult to get answers from a lot of bureaucracies, but it's quite more difficult in the Defense Department.
Senator Grassley, I appreciate your time. We'll continue to follow this. Thank you.
The Defense Department releasing brand new details into an investigation involving child pornography and dozens of its workers and contractors, some with top-level security clearance. Not only are these very serious accusations, but investigators say some of the people involved were handling the nation's most sensitive secrets, potentially making this a matter of national security. Chief Fox Report correspondent Jonathan Hunt with the news. Appalling story, Jonathan. Do we know more about these people and their security clearances?
Well, we don't know their exact job titles, John, but what we do know is that they did appear to have been working, some of them, at high levels across a range of government agencies. Take a look at this, for instance, the National Security Agency, the National Reconnaissance Office, and the very secretive Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency. Others also worked on actual military installations, including Edwards Air Force Base in California and also the California-based Naval Air Warfare Center. So they had access to military secrets in some cases and military hardware, John.
Are all these suspects under arrest?
They're not all under arrest. We got 94 pages of investigative material from the Defense Department today, including dozens of specific individuals. They have not all been arrested, though. Some have been tried, some have been sentenced, but some have, the cases simply fell apart because of lack of evidence. And legal experts tell us it is always very difficult to prosecute child porn cases, not least because it's difficult to prove who exactly was on any given computer. Listen.
Who has the password? Who has the identification to get into that? Was it you who opened the computer and I went on it? Those are very difficult aspects in prosecuting. Then there's finding the victims. Are they abused victims? Are they underage? Did they appear overage? You know, there's a lot of difficulties built right into child pornography cases.
But Josh Hanshaft also told me it is imperative that the government find a way to prosecute in these cases because they are so important and so disturbing.
And this isn't just about workers committing crime.
No, it's not. The big fear here is that there is a possibility that these people open themselves to blackmail by a foreign power that wants to get information about our military secrets, or even terrorists. So the Defense Department is very concerned. It says they are taking all of these cases very seriously indeed.
Despite the DoD taking steps to limit access to various websites, most notably child pornography, the Pentagon apparently has come under investigation for links to the proliferation of graphic material. Called Project Flickr, some 5,000 individuals have been identified as having subscriptions to child porn sites, including many DoD-affiliated persons. So this ongoing national investigation has now prompted the House to introduce a bipartisan bill that would help the DoD stop the use of its network to, quote, possess, procure, or produce child pornography. Joining us to discuss this, investigative journalist Ben Swann. So Ben, the Pentagon already takes measures to limit worker access to stuff like porn by rolling out what they call the Personal Electronic Device PED policy, where workers have to drop off their phones and lockers before entering their offices. All their online searches are accessible by security if or when needed. Their Wi-Fi access is monitored in digital security sweeps. So how is this happening?
Well, it's happening because even though there is a certain amount of limitation on access, those who are working in the Department of Defense, clearly it appears to be thousands of individuals in the Department of Defense, are finding ways around this, specifically by using the Department of Defense IP addresses and also apparently peer-to-peer sharing within the department's network. So this study that was done on this issue, and it is pretty horrifying, Manila, to consider this. It shows that the Department of Defense ranked 19th out of almost 3,000 networks in terms of peer-to-peer sharing of child pornography. That is absolutely incredible. This bill attempts to essentially say, look, we're not doing enough to stop it from coming in, but we're also not doing enough in the Department of Defense to go after those individuals who are being recognized as the ones who are perpetrating this.
So Congresswoman Abigail Spanberger is the co-author to this bill. She said this, quote, the notion that the Department of Defense's network and Pentagon-issued computers may be used to view, create, or circulate such horrifying images is a shameful disgrace and one we must fight head-on. Now, the fact that the Pentagon workers, be they civil or military or otherwise, already submit to a gauntlet of daily scrutiny just going in and out of work, is it fair then to the tens of thousands who are completely innocent to further allow that much more government intrusion into their, their digital devices or the things that they're dealing with on their computers?
Well, remember that what's being talked about here is not an intrusion into someone's personal device or even their home. This is about saying Department of Defense computers are being misused to share, to spread, to access child pornography. And when you step into an office, whether it's a Department of Defense office or it's the offices at RT America, wherever you go into an office, you do not have the right to simply use the technology within that office space however you want, and you certainly don't have the right to use it in a criminal manner. So essentially this bill is trying to do, again, two things. It's trying to limit that and crack down on the misuse of those computer systems, but it also is going after those individuals. One of the things that this bill attempts to do, and there's a Senate version of it put together by Republican Senator Lisa Murkowski from Alaska, but essentially what these two bills are trying to do is say, look, the Department of Defense does not have an adequate way of responding to this, of tracking down and investigating who as an individual is misusing these computers, who is sharing these pornographic images of children, who is sending them to whom. And so one of the things it does is the bill actually opens up civilian law enforcement to come in and to work with the Pentagon and with the DoD to actually investigate and to track down who is misusing, again, these computers for this purpose. So the bill, it's about more than just stopping it. It's about going after those who have been perpetrating it, who so far aren't being gone after.
Now, Ben, you and I, obviously, we're both parents here, and this is something that is terrifying, I think, to anybody that is a parent. What about the bigger... Infuriating. I mean, it's disgusting and maddening. The bigger picture here, Ben, How do we, the people, crack down on this? It's a disgusting crime. How is this continuing to proliferate in a day where they can track your every movement and what you do?
Well, because clearly in this case, these are the people who are helping to do the tracking. I know NSA and a lot of these civilian agencies do, but when you reach a certain point within these military spaces, a lot of these people apparently feel that they can go untouched. And so far, they pretty much have. About 80% of the cases where child pornography has been sent through these DoD servers have not been prosecuted, have not even been looked at or tracked down. 80% of them, Manila. So the majority of the people who are doing this through the Department of Defense are not having to pay any kind of price for it. I think this is a very serious issue, but it's also an issue that we need to recognize is a very real issue.
Yeah.
When people talk about child pornography or predators out there, we are being limited to a discussion of that, the creepy person who lives in a certain house, and that's what we want to talk about it. But when we talk about it on a bigger spectrum, military, government, those who are in power, people don't want to discuss it. It's a very real issue.
Yeah, I think it's important to point out that there's some 25,000 people that go in and out of the Pentagon every single day, and a lot of these, I mean, they have to have some level of clearance to begin with, but I think some of the people that are not being prosecuted are some of the ones who have the highest clearances in this country. So that's kind of a scary thing to think about.
Some of these people we know have the highest classification in terms of classified access to information and material, and that's pretty scary.
That is scary that some of those people might be these gross individuals sharing this kind of information. All right, Ben Swan, as always, appreciate your take on this. Thank you.
Hey YouTube, thanks for checking out our channel. We hope you enjoyed the video. We have tons of content for you just like this. For more of RT America's one-of-a-kind news and analysis, be sure to subscribe and never stop questioning more.
It's fun. Dr. Carla Turner, famous abductee and speaker, wonderful lady, passed away of metastatic cancer. No, the aliens didn't kill her. I'm sorry for those conspiracists that want to believe that. She told me herself, because we're friends, that they did not kill her. I believe that. But I'm sure they did not cry when she died. She's a fighter. She's tough. She had an abductee on board a craft, a woman, who was raped by an animal that looked like a large pig, according to her. There was a witness, a man, who saw the event. They finally met each other, talked about it, and cried, and all the things that we do whenever the stuff finally comes out. And they did a vaginal search on her. They did a forensic test on her for a rape case, basically. And they found this evidence inside her. Little tiny black pieces of something. Candy told me, it was her, everybody knew her by Candy, it was her friend. Candy told me, she said, I took it to a forensic lab and had it tested. I want you to have it. I said, why me? She says, I've taken it as far as I can go. She said, forensic lab were friends of mine, and they came back and handed this to me in a little vial and says, I don't know what it is. I don't want to know what it is. And that's the weirdest stuff I've ever seen in my entire life. He said, that compound cannot exist in that matrix. It can't. And don't you ever quote me. She said, that's my friend. If my friend is having these kind of problems, what do you suppose what it's going to be like with the other labs? And I said, give it to me. I said, I know what to do. She said, that's why I'm giving it to you. So I have those samples, and they will soon be exploited. We already have a fairly decent idea, a good possible answer of what this material may be. It may be biological and metallic at the same time. That's why the forensic lab is freaked out over it. You normally don't get two substances mixing like that. Sometimes these entities are described as biomechanical. Wouldn't that be interesting if we had a sample?
The cut on her jawbone was just real sharp, precise cut.
A large incision, removing its sex organs, rectum had been cored out, tail cut off.
Her
milk sac had been cut out on the left side in an oval about the size of a basketball.
It's a mystery that remains unexplained after 30 years of investigation. Some claim alien forces are responsible. Others claim cult activity or secret government testing. Cattle mutilation. The most recent outbreak appears to have been in a 3-county area of northeastern Alabama. Over 50 cases of mutilation have been reported in just the past 6 months. Organs appear to have been removed with surgical precision. So far, the farmers in the area have lost more than $40,000 in livestock. With such tremendous losses, the police department in Fife, Alabama has launched an intensive investigation. Ted Oliphant is a Fife police officer who has personally investigated more than 30 cattle mutilation cases.
We're finding the same thing over and over again. The sex organs have been removed from the animals, the tongues have been cut out of them, the jaw has been stripped into oval, clean to the bone, and all without blood.
Who or what is responsible for the seemingly ritualistic slaughter of these cattle? Researchers have little to go on beyond these decomposing carcasses. And despite attempts to prove that a sinister force is at work here, some experts believe the mutilations are all the result of natural causes.
It leads us to think maybe that animal is getting mutilated, but what's happening is predators, vultures, are also involved with that process.
The indication that the predators are not responsible for these animals being cut on is the evidence of high heat at the excision, evidence of high heat in excess of several hundred degrees or more, according to the pathologist who studied the tissue samples.
That pathologist is Dr. John Altschuler. He has studied suspect cattle tissue for the last 4 years.
The tissue at the incisional areas is very firm and very hard and looks burned. And the microscopic evidence clearly indicates that heat has been applied, and predators, to my knowledge, cannot do that. Here we have a photomicrograph taken of the hide from an animal where we've had evidence of burning. The arrow shows a pink color to the tissue underneath the lining of the hide. As we move towards the cut area, you notice a definite color change from pink down here to blue up here. This is a very typical change of exposure of tissue to heat.
Other unusual evidence has been found at some alleged mutilation sites. A white flaky substance was recovered from one Alabama location. Officer Oliphant had it analyzed at one Eastern university.
And they determined that it was composed of aluminum, titanium, silicon, and oxygen. Aluminum and oxygen, or aluminum oxide, is what's used in the styptic pencil that I use if I've cut myself after shaving, and that stops bleeding. Perhaps that has something to do with why the animals don't have blood on them at the excision lines.
In more than half of the Alabama cases, farmers report seeing an unmarked helicopter leaving the scene just before or after a cattle mutilation.
They had a chopper in behind my barn. Had all my cattle rounded up in behind the barn. The chopper, when it appeared, it was kind of unordinary. It looked like it's sitting on a box, you know. Of course, it was big enough to get a cow in, you know. If they catch them hovering over their cattle and pasture, I'd probably shoot him. Probably shoot him.
Loud helicopter noise, sounded like it was right over the trailer. Went out the front door, went over to my car, returned the seat, pulled out a handgun. I walked towards the edge of the trailer. I saw the helicopter. It's a light blue helicopter, no markings, no numbers, and it was hovering about 15 foot above the tree. I dropped my holster, and the helicopter veered off.
I think the greatest mystery of this case is the lack of physical evidence that we found at the sites. Only in one case did we find that white flaky material. We haven't been able to find footprints, we haven't been able to find tracks or wheel marks or anything to indicate that anybody's even been in there. How do you explain that? We can't.
My tendency to believe is it's something of a lot higher intelligence than what we've got in normal everyday occurrence around here.
Don't really have any ideas who could be doing it or the reasons behind it, you know. You could get most of the parts they removed from a slaughterhouse for free, you know.
Yes, sir, I run a meat processing plant, and I made a statement that I would donate them jawbone, their blood, their rectum, and whatever, you know, if they just asked me for it, and then they wouldn't have to kill these farmers' cattle like they do.
Despite the willingness of the ranchers to cooperate with authorities in a larger scale investigation, most government officials are sticking to the predator theory. They do not believe that high tension lines in the area are somehow related to the mutilations. They also deny charges that the government is mutilating cattle in order to support new technology, replacing human blood with bovine blood. And what about the unmarked helicopters? Do they point to the existence of a conspiracy?
I think the helicopters are doing the same thing we're doing on the ground. I think they're investigating who's doing this. They're trying to find out too. And because of their behavior, it's obvious that they'd rather have us think that they're doing it than what's actually happening.
Whoever or whatever is responsible may never be known. The silent testimony of these mutilation victims has not been able to resolve the mystery. One of the most intriguing aspects of our investigation is what we didn't find. The moment our sightings team arrived in 𝗲𝗃, the mutilations stopped. Did our presence scare someone or something away? Or was it merely coincidence that our investigation coincided with an end to this bizarre phenomenon?
A sadistic child abuser goes for a walk. He's in a park. He sees a child. Can you take us inside his mind at that moment, what it is that he's thinking or feeling that is propelling him towards that child in an attempt to lure?
They see them as instruments for their own gratification. One offender said, "I have desperately tried to turn them into human beings. I try to see them as children. I try to see them as people, and I'm unable to. I just can't do it. They're simply there for me to live out the fantasies that are in my head."
Wow. That is a level of psychosis that's unimaginable to most of us. Do you understand it?
I have been face to face with them many times, so I know who they are. I know when they say it, what they're going to say. I know that that's their experience, but it's completely foreign to humanity. It's completely inhumane.
Do they understand the disgust with which society views them?
Yes.
What do they think about that?
Depending on the offender, they either feel that we as a society are the distorted ones, that we don't understand how beautiful this can be, that we don't understand that what they were doing wasn't harmful, that we don't understand that a 6-year-old in fact can consent, and others just don't care.